standards. We have them in every area of our life, but sometimes we forget to define them in our conversations with prospects. In this snippet, we'll revisit a few of my 9 conversation standards that will help you gain self-awareness and drive high-performance results. Listen to this quick snippet, and if you want to revisit the full-length conversation, scroll back to episode number 38.
First one that we've got here is the focus on the outcome versus the process in your conversations. Dan, can you dig into this one a little bit more for us?
This one kind of starts the domino effect for all of them. So as a sales professional, if I go into a conversation, whether with a client or a prospect, and I'm focused on the outcome, I'm only going to listen for information that aligns with me potentially getting a second meeting, or it aligns with me scheduling a demo. The outcome of the demo and the outcome of the second conversation is something that I want. And what happens is I end up missing all kinds of opportunities to learn more and challenge that prospect's current perspective. Process is a little bit different. Process is when we focus on our questions and our learning, and we bet on our process for asking questions and learning to the point where it's all about how and if we can help that prospect and are they ready. And we're not worried about, do we get the second meeting? Do we get the demo? Did they like us? That's process-based. High performers focus on the process. That's why they learn more. They actually help that prospect. So an amateur mindset is going to focus on the outcome, and they will only listen for things that drive to the outcome they want. They will only ask questions that drive toward the outcome they want. That amateur mindset limits their learning, and then it also limits the perspective of the prospect. And ironically, it ends up creating the same conversation that prospect's already used to having with all of the sales professionals' current competition. Everybody sounds the same. That's what happens when you focus on an outcome. When you focus on process, though, you're focusing on your questions. You're focusing on your listening. You're able to ask questions that helps that prospect determine if they want and need help. So at the end of a conversation, how much of your mindset was focused on, got to get the outcome, got to get the second meeting, don't blow this, get the demo, and you considered that success? Versus how much of your thought process was focused on, I'm not labeling anything, I'm not setting a value on anything yet. Let me see how much I can learn here, and let me see how much that prospect's willing to share and how much debate and evaluation that prospect is willing to do in this conversation with me.
How are amateurs versus high performers asking questions in their conversations with prospects?
Yeah, that's a great question, Kylie. Amateur mindsets will only ask questions that they know the answer to.
Why do you think that is, Dan?
The amateur mindset is focused on the outcome. In order to get the outcome that they want and guide the conversation in the direction they want, the amateur mindset asks particular questions that lend itself to that outcome. And they don't want to risk not achieving the outcome, and they want to stay in control of the conversation. That's how the amateur mindset works. If I ask these questions I know the answer to, it's an easy way for me to guide the prospect to either A, B, or C.
The amateur question asking also comes through with multiple choice questions. Instead of just saying, what are some of your goals for the next year? They may say, is it to grow headcount? Is there a revenue goal in mind? Or are you looking to expand into new areas, territories? We might give a multiple choice question instead of just, what are your growth goals?
Absolutely. And that's very leading. You're setting the parameters for the answer.
And it limits your learning.
Right. Most importantly, though, it limits the perspective of the prospect or client. And the reason why that's so important is because your prospect and client, they come into the meeting with you with a perspective already. That perspective could be anything, but it will be influenced by that prospect or client's current biases and experiences. If you want the prospect or the client to consider change, the most important thing that you have to do is learn how to ask questions to help that prospect or client evaluate and debate and potentially adopt or change their perspective first.
And I think this segues really nicely into number 3, which is amateurs are listening for what they want to hear versus the high performers who are listening to what they need to hear.
Yeah, with the multiple choice questions, when an amateur mindseted sales professional asks questions, they'll often give 2 or 3 options. That is that innate need to try to garner or uncover what they want to hear. Versus the high performer mindset, they're okay with whatever the answer is because they understand it's all about what they need to hear. So if you think about it, if there's certain things that you want to hear in a relationship, you're going to ask certain questions so you hear it. You're going to limit your learning, and again, you're going to limit the perspective of the other person. And if you go the other route and you're having a conversation with someone, but you want to get to the truth and you're okay with whatever the truth is, you're going to ask questions and listen for what you need to hear. And that's a big difference between the amateur mindset and the high performance mindset.
I also think this goes back to, and this is something we've talked about a lot, just observing in role plays, asking qualifying questions versus curious questions.
Yeah, we could do a whole podcast on that, and maybe we should. But quite simply, if you have a list of questions and you're rattling off the questions one after another, you are going to appear as if you're trying to qualify the prospect. It's okay to have a list of questions, but focus more on your process of learning and allow that natural curiosity to come out. Believe me, your prospect can tell the difference between you trying to qualify them versus you innately just being curious about them, their business, what's working and what's not working.
Number 4 on the list, Dan, is judging versus learning. Talk to me about that one.
If you go back to the amateur mindset, there's a strong need to control. With a strong need to control comes the innate routine or habit of judging. Prospect says something you don't want to hear, and you don't want to hear it because it might be a barrier to you achieving the outcome that you want in that meeting. You are now judging what they said more than likely as bad. And when you judge something as bad, the innate tendency is to avoid it, is to move on to something or find something good. Judging is low energy and it limits curiosity. Learning is much different. Learning is having and allowing your curiosity to come out, not judging anything as good or bad, so that if something is said that you would typically label as bad, because you're in learning mode, you're going to ask more questions about it. You're going to learn and try to uncover more about whatever it was that prospect and client said. So judging leads to dead ends. Learning leads to further, more in-depth conversation. This has been a Breaking Sales Snippet. To hear the rest of the conversation, check out the episode linked in the show notes and subscribe to the show so you're the first to know when a new episode drops.